We're all given a gift. It's the gift of speech. Some of us don't use it so wisely. Besides the prohibition of lashon hara, gossip and slander and rumor that we must avoid, there's also other laws of speech that can deeply impact your life and change your relationships. If you're careful with them, they can change it really to the positive in a very big way. One of them is about repeating information. When are you allowed to repeat information? Unless you have permission from the person who told you the information, never. You must have permission. Where do we know this from? In the Torah itself. It says God told Moses to tell the Jewish people, and then Moses goes and tells the Jewish people. But if God doesn't tell Moses to tell the Jewish people, it's just God told Moses, he's not allowed to repeat it. He needed God's permission. If somebody tells you some information, they're going to sell their house. They're going to put their house up for sale. You are not allowed to repeat that information to anyone else unless you have permission from the first person. What's the big deal? He's going to sell his house. It doesn't seem so important. Why shouldn't I mention it to somebody else? First of all, why are you talking about other people's lives? Do you want people talking about your life? Probably not. But besides that, information that you think is harmless, that you think is not going to affect anyone, can hurt people, can ruin people. Imagine you said to a friend of yours, so-and-so is putting their house up for sale. And your friend is married to so-and-so's boss. And he had no idea that so-and-so was putting his house up for sale because he's moving, he's leaving the country because he's transferring to another company. Do you see how this can get a little bit complicated? Did you see how this could maybe be a problem? But what about positive information? What's wrong with repeating happy news, positive news? Somebody's pregnant, right? Why should I repeat that information? You know what? You better be careful. What you're saying, why you're saying it, and who you're saying it to. I have a friend. She has suffered for years from infertility. She says whenever somebody comes up to her and says, "Did you hear so-and-so is pregnant?" She says she has to pretend to be happy, but inside, she says it's like a knife in her heart. She's dying. She says it's a knife in my heart and somebody's twisting it. She's going to find out soon enough that so-and-so's pregnant when so-and-so's walking around. But let her find out privately. Let her find out on her own. So she doesn't have to pretend to be so happy. There's a part of her that is happy, but there's a part of her that's dying and that's crying. What are you saying? Why are you saying it? Who are you saying it to? If you're wondering if this information could be passed on and you're not sure, better to err on the side of not saying it all. Go back to the person who said it to you and ask them, is it okay if I tell people that you're moving? Is it okay if I tell people, is it public knowledge that you're pregnant? And even then, be careful with the information, even when they give you permission. If someone says information in front of 3 or more people, and it's positive information, and it's said in a very public way, you really do have Rishus permission to be able to repeat it, but be careful out there. The other area I want to discuss when it comes to speech is truth, honesty. It says in Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism, when God signs his name, he signs it emet. He signs it truth. Now, God doesn't have a hand, God doesn't have a pen, and he's not really signing his name. But what is that telling you? It's telling you that truth is a very, very, very important quality for every human being, and certainly for every Jew. You must always, always tell the truth, except under 3 conditions. There are 3 areas where not only are you allowed to, in certain times you are obligated to lie. What are those areas? The first one I want to deal with is called Shalom Bayit, peace in the house. Peace, shalom, between people. I'll give you an example. Imagine that your friend redecorated their home, and they invite you over after they redecorate, and you come to their home, and they invite you in, and they say to you, "What do you think? What do you think? It's beautiful. What do you think? What do you think? Tell me the truth. What do you think?" And you're feeling nauseous and dizzy because they've decorated in orange and purple. What should you say? Your friend is telling you, "Tell me the truth." You can't stand their home. What should you say? There are two schools of thought. Some people say, you say, "Wow! Wow! Did I say wow? This is really, it's you." You're trying to avoid, right? Or you're picking something like, "Wow, those are really vibrant colors. They're really vibrant." You pick something that you know to be true and you sort of build on that, and you're trying to avoid little white lies. The other school of thought is to come into their home and they say, "What do you think?" And you say, "I love it. It's beautiful. Oh, who's your decorator? I must call them." These two schools of thought on reaction are talked about in our Talmud. The scenario is given as follows. The story is that a man and a woman are getting married, and you are the friend of the groom, the chatan. You travel to come to the wedding. You peek in where all the women are before you see your friend, and you see the kala, the bride. How can I describe her? She has a good personality. You hear what I'm saying? By anybody's stretch of imagination, this is not an attractive girl. You're really surprised that your friend is marrying this not attractive girl. Then you see your friend. He goes, "Hey, buddy, thanks for coming. Thanks for coming to my wedding. Did you see my bride? Isn't she beautiful? Did you see her? Isn't she pretty?" So the Talmud discusses two schools of thought. The school of Shammai says you sort of zero in, as we did with the decorating, on something that's kind of true and build on that to try to avoid the truth. "You lucky guy, you. She looks so strong. You'll never have to haul water from the river. She's going to do everything for you. Wow, wow." That's the first school of thought. That's the wow. Did I say wow? The second school of thought is from the school of Hillel. The school of Hillel says, when your friend says, "Isn't she beautiful? Tell me the truth." You say, "She is. She's beautiful. You lucky guy, you. She's stunning. She's so pretty." You're lying. Why are you allowed to lie? For peace between the bride and the groom. You're allowed to lie. There are things that are more important than truth, and that's peace between people. We see this in the Torah. Abraham and Sarah get married. They never have children, and they grow old. And the angels, disguised as traveling Bedouins, come to Sarah, and they say to her, "At this time next year," and she's very old, "at this time next year, you will have a son." And she laughs, and she says, "How can I have a son? My husband and I are so old." And then Abraham overhears the laughter and says to God, they were very close, "Why is my wife laughing?" And God says to Abraham, "Sarah's laughing because she's been told that at this time next year, she will have a son. And she laughed and said, 'How can I have a son? I'm so old.'" That's not what Sarah said. She said, "My husband and I are so old." God lied. God lied to preserve peace between a husband and wife, between Abraham and Sarah. There are things that are more important than truth. People's feelings. People's feelings. got a new haircut. How do you like my new haircut? What do you think? Tell me the truth. What do you think? Was she going to glue it back on if you don't like it? If you don't like it, you can lie and say, I really like it. But the next time she's going to cut her hair, the next time your friend is redecorating, perhaps you can show them different things or different options for them to help them make perhaps a better decision. When people say to you, tell me the truth, really, I want to know, tell me what you think, usually they're not asking for your opinion. If they really wanted your opinion, when would they have asked you? Before they redecorated, they would have brought you the paint chips and the swatches. Before they got engaged, before they cut their hair. They're not asking for your opinion. They're asking for approval. Give it to them. Give it to them. So that's peace. That's peace. The second thing you're allowed to lie for is privacy. I heard you got a $10,562 raise. And you got a $10,562 raise. You can say, no, I didn't. You can lie. Why? It's none of their business. You have personal dignity. You have personal space. A person does not have the right to invade it. Now, if the tax collector says to you, did you make $10,562? Did you get a $10,562 raise this year? You can't lie because it's none of their business, because it is their business. Be careful with this one, especially with children. For example, if the phone rings and your spouse answers, and it is somebody you don't want to talk to, all right? You can tell your spouse, tell them I'm not home. Why? Because this is your private home, and you don't, it's your privacy. They don't have a right just because they have your phone number to invade it. You can say, I'm not home. But if your child answers, your son or your daughter answers the phone, you can't tell them I'm not home. Why? Because they don't understand the nuances, the subtleties of these laws. And you're just teaching your children to lie. And that's a very dangerous thing. Okay? The third time you're allowed to lie is to minimize your accomplishments. For humility. For humility. I heard you ran that school fundraiser all by yourself. You could say, don't be silly. I was just one of a whole team of people. We had a whole committee. And you know on the piece of paper, it listed the committee, but you ran that fundraiser all by yourself. Why can you lie? You can lie for humility, to minimize your accomplishments. Humility, the Rambam, Maimonides, the 12th century scholar, says is the most important midah, character trait, to have. The most important. Of all the character traits you could list, this is the most important. And the worst character trait to have is the opposite of humility, and that's arrogance, kaifa. Humility. You'll never see on Time magazine's humblest man of the year. You won't see that. We don't think in our world, in our society today, that humility is such a great thing. We actually think, oh, nebuch, it's like a not a good thing. It's the guy with the glasses and the tape and the he belongs to the chess club and he's like a nothing, a low. If I told you that the humblest man that I have ever met is going to come in here now, and you're going to be able to meet him, how would the humblest man who I've ever met, the humblest man in this country, how would he knock on the door? Quietly. And how would he enter the door? Hunched over, right? How would he come in? He'd want to sit in the corner. I'd go, no, please, they really want to meet you. He'd come over. How would he sit in his chair? Right? The humblest man. How would he speak? So quietly. It says in our Torah that Moshe Rabbeinu, was the humblest man who ever lived. Moshe was the humblest man who ever lived? Do you think he went to Paro and said to him, excuse me, Mr. Paro, if it's not too much trouble, I don't want to bother you, but if you could possibly, if you have some time, if you could let my people go, but only if it's not too much. No, let my people go. Moshe went up to Har Sinai, got the Torah, was victorious in war, stood up against Paro, all the sea. He was the humblest man who ever lived? What happened to the Nebush little who's... No. Humility is not, I'm nothing. Humility is, I'm something, but I know the source of it. I know it's from God. Pride is the invitation for arrogance. Pride. So proud. So proud. What are you proud of? Don't take pride, take pleasure. People often say, if I ask them, what are they proud of? Oh, I'm proud of my degree. I got my degree. Oh yeah? What are you proud of? That you happen to be born in a time of life, of the creation of the universe, where people did not have to work in the fields but could go on to higher education, where Jewish people could go on to higher education, where you had parents who had the financial ability to be able to give you, where you were given an intelligence that you were able to. What are you proud of? Take pleasure. Take pleasure that you use the opportunities that this world and that the Almighty has given you for good. But don't take pride. Pride is, it's me. It's all me. You know what? You had some help. You had a lot of help. Imagine a bar mitzvah boy tells me, I got a check in the mail from my aunt, and he tells me the story. He's so proud of it. I picked up the envelope. I opened up the envelope. I took out the check. I read the check. I folded the check and put it in my pocket. I went to the bank. I opened the door. I found the right line. I stood in line and walked forward. I lifted up the pen. I signed the check and cashed the check. I'm so proud. And you're sitting there listening to the story. What, you're an idiot? You'd be crazy, you'd be insane not to cash the check. What are you proud of? Ladies and gentlemen, when we're using our mind and our talents and our efforts, we're cashing the check that God wrote. Don't take pride, take pleasure. Take pleasure. When you get into pride, arrogance lurks. It's right there around the corner. And arrogance is the worst. Arrogance takes you out of this world. Arrogance, I'm so full of me. There's no room for anybody else. There's certainly no room for God because I think I'm God. I hate to say this, gentlemen, but men have a harder time with this one than women. And that's why there are certain mitzvot that help keep a man humble. I have to tell you a true story. When we were living in Toronto years ago, it was Erev Shabbat, it was Friday afternoon, and I brought at the time, my daughter and my son, they were probably about 8 and 6, or maybe 7 and 5 at the time, and I brought them to a street festival that the merchants were having in the community just before Shabbat, just to entice people to come to shop in their shops. So we went out there. I had prepared everything for Shabbat already, and we went out, and there's like the street festivals, there's jugglers and people shining shoes for free, and the merchants had provided all of this to entice people. And there was somebody doing caricatures, right? There was an artist doing caricatures, and my children were watching, and they were saying, you know, what is she doing? And I said, well, a caricature is like drawing sort of a picture of you, but in an exaggerative sort of funny way. They go, oh, God, I want to do it. I said, okay, fine. So it was free. So my daughter sits down, and she starts drawing my daughter, right? And she's asking my daughter, what do you like to do? She says, I like to read books. And so she draws her on a stack of books. Very nice, right? Shh, finished. Then my son, Zevi, sits down. And he's wearing a kippah. And this woman, she's not Jewish, she says to him, take off that beanie. And my son, Zevi's like, no. And I said to her, no, we're Jewish and we're, observant Jews, and the boys wear this. And she says, oh, I'm so sorry, because she wasn't Jewish. She was very respectful. So sorry. She starts drawing him. And she's drawing him, and she says to him, what do you want to be when you grow up? And he says, a Rebbe. And I'm translating, saying, a teacher, right? And she's drawing him. And she says to me while she's drawing, she looks at him and she looks at my daughter, and she says, why does he have to wear one of those and she doesn't? And I said, well, the reason why you wear it's called a kippah, the reason why you wear it is to remember there's a God above you. So she's drawing, and she goes, I'm not getting this. I said, a man without this thinks he's God. And she said, I know somebody who should wear one of those. It's not a guarantee. It's not a guarantee that's going to keep you humble and you're going to remember. There are people who wear kippahs who are not so good at humility. And there are people who don't, who are great at it. It's a tool. It's a reminder. If we don't have that reminder, we can forget. And we can get into pride, and we can get into arrogance. And again, men have this commandment because they have a little bit more of a challenge than women. They're out in their day. If I don't do it, it's not going to get done. And you know what? That kippah's there to remind you. You know what? God runs the world. Yes, you have to make your maximum effort, but God runs the world. So the 3 times that a person's allowed to lie, let's review. The first one, for peace, for shalom bayit, for peace between people. Right? When people are asking for your opinion, they're usually just asking for approval, and you can give it to them. The second thing, privacy. Your life is not an open book. There are things that are it's none of their business, and you can lie. The third thing is to minimize your accomplishments, for humility. Right? Now, don't get carried away with the humility thing a little bit, okay? Somebody went up to Einstein and said, I heard you're a genius in physics. Ugh, I know a little 2 + 2. You're just going to draw more attention to yourself, all right? When you do something and you have an accomplishment, take pleasure. You know what you did. God knows what you did. No one else has to know. I want to tell you a true story. It's one of the better stories I've heard, and I heard it from the person that it happened to, that has to do with sharing information, lashon hara, when to tell the truth, when to hold back, and when not to. So a woman told me the story. She had 2 sons who became balei tshuva, and they were learning at a yeshiva in Israel. She lived in Canada, and her husband decided to go and visit their sons, who they didn't know what they were doing in Israel. They came with a very sort of negative attitude about their sons becoming dati. But after they went to some classes and they met the people and the rebbeim and everybody around them, they were feeling much more positive. They saw that they were in a good place and they were doing well, and they were impressed. But after a while, all this Torah started being a little bit too much for them. So they said, you know what, we're going to go to Netanya. We're going to go to a resort in Netanya to visit the beach while we're here. They said goodbye. They went to the resort, and she told me the story. She said she was lying by the pool, and she's lying in her in the lounge, in the chaise lounge. And there were 2 women to her right and 1 woman to her left. And the 2 women to her right were in this animated conversation. Because she was right beside them, she couldn't help but overhear. And they were talking about this people that they know back in Canada, and how this marriage of this guy that they know to this woman, and that his first marriage didn't work out, and there were all these dirty details and gossipy details about it, but they really weren't sure about it. And she would realize as she was listening, she knew who they were talking about. She knew, they were talking about people that she knew back in Canada. And she knew the whole story of this guy's first marriage. She was about to turn to them and say, oh my gosh, this is like an unbelievable coincidence, and I happen to know all the juicy details of his first marriage, and share them. And she was about to do it, and she had this vision of her sons, the rabbinical students, and their rabbis, and the class that she had just heard about lashon hara, and not to repeat information, and it reflects badly on people. And she was like, she said she held back and she didn't say anything. The 2 women got up, they had finished their conversation, and they're gone. And she's lying there. And the woman to her left asks her the time. And she tells her what the time is. And they started getting into conversation, you know how women are. Conversation, and it turns out, and she told me, she said, it turns out that the woman to her left was the mother of the first wife of the guy that they were talking about. She was shaking. She realized that if she had turned to them and said all the dirty details about his first marriage, this woman would have overheard and would have said, excuse me, but that's my daughter you're talking about. And she said, I would have died 1,000 deaths. You don't know who's listening. You don't know who's beside you. But the one thing you do know is that there's somebody above you. God created this world, and he wants us to have all the pleasure that we can, all the permitted pleasures. When people say, it's fun to speak about other people, it's fun to gossip, yeah, it's fun, unless they're talking about you. Then it's not so much fun anymore, is it? Think before you speak. What are you saying? Why are you saying it? And who you're saying it to? It says in Kabbalah that when we're born, God assigns us a certain amount of words. And once we use them up, it's over. Choose wisely.